Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Friday Morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff, all the way up from Canada. Good morning, my friend.
Yes,
How's
morning,
things your
sir.
way this morning?
Well, I think we're going to get a little bit of a cooler day today, so I'll get out for some football with my son. Well, I haven't been jogging. I haven't been playing football because it's been way too hot and way too humid. So,
Yeah, same here.
but
I think tomorrow it's only going to be in the mid 70s. I think a high. Today it's still going to be in the 80s, but the last couple of days, man, 90s,
yeah,
humid. Wow.
same deal, same deal. We pretty much get the same weather as you a lot, but I gather you missed the whole hurricane weather thing, eh?
Well, we got 2 days of nonstop heavy rains, but we didn't, they called for like these high winds and all the outages and power outages, and we didn't get any of that. We just got steady pulverizing rain for 2 straight days. But then it's been, you know, hot and humid since then. So, but I think they're calling for some rain over the weekend and into next week. So, but we'll see. But the weather's really pleasant today. I went out for my swim this morning. It was great.
Nice,
And nice
good for
crisp
you.
weather, Yeah.
Wicked.
We only have probably about 2 more weeks left with pool, so then got to close it up for the season. So anyway, there's your weather report for the day. So today we've got a really interesting show that just kind of came about in some conversations on a previous episode. This whole idea of albums that we like a lot, but we readily recognize that there are a lot of peaks and valleys in these albums, and they're really uneven. And I think we rank them kind of high in these catalogs, really only for a couple of songs. So Martin and I, over the last week, we've gone through our album collections and really like thought hard about these albums that we're like, yeah, I really like that album. But honestly, probably only because of a couple songs. And there's actually tracks on this album we really don't care for much. So, and that can happen. And I've been talking about that a lot in recent months, where you have these albums that you like, you rank higher in a ranking list just because of those couple of songs, even though there are other albums that top to bottom way stronger. But it's because of those songs that they kind of creep up the list. So I'm going to have Martin kick us off with his first selection of the day for Peaks and Valleys albums.
All right. Yeah, this was really tough because a lot of concepts come into mind, like these are albums you want to love more and you wish they were better. And you like the idea of them. Maybe you like the production or when it came out. And like you say, Pete, I mean, the idea is that we tend to forget how few songs we like on them, and we just automatically rate them higher because of just the other things involved in the oeuvre of it. And so my first choice is Aerosmith, Draw the Line. This is 1977. It's Aerosmith, right? What's not to love? It's right after Rocks. It's right before Night in the Ruts, right? But here's the thing. I've often called, I've put it in writing, I've called Draw the Line the greatest song of all time by anybody. Because of this idea of it's got this weird, complicated riff. The performance is incredible. The vocal is incredible. It's just odd and interesting. It feels like an epic, but it's not super long. So, when I think of my favorite Aerosmith song of all time, it's got to be Draw the Line, because I'm even calling it the greatest song of all time. And I quite like Kings and Queens, even though I've always been a little grudging about the idea that it doesn't feel like an Aerosmith lyrical field, the place where you go for Aerosmith. But
still a great song, though. Still a great song.
Yeah, it is. And I love Bright Light Fright. I think that's the best you ever get out of a Joe Perry vocal. A really cool song, kind of like an angular fast rocker. But, for the rest of this album, I Want to Know Why is pretty cool too. But Critical Mass, never a big fan. Get It Up, not a big fan. All of side 2 after Kings and Queens with The Hand That Feeds, don't like. Sight for Sore Eyes. I don't like when they do the really kind of junky, slow, funky kind of thing. I was never a Last Child fan either. And Milk Cow Blues, I remember liking as a kid. But the fact that it's a cover, like it's a heavy cover, like a Zeppelin-esque, doing their thing, heavy cover of an old blues song, not that crazy about it. So yeah, I mean, this album is just so dominated by the song Draw the Line. And I always kind of rate this album high because you got it. It's Aerosmith. It's 1977, right? But really, no, it would be below Night in the Ruts for me. It'd probably be below Rock in a Hard Place, certainly below Toys in the Attic. It's just, even though the atmosphere and the mood and the, making it in Bearsville and all the guys are on drugs and it's like a running on fumes album and all this, drama behind it. No, it's just not there with the songs for me. So there you go. First choice.
Cool. Good choice. Good album. I would almost, for me, I would almost include their first album in this discussion as well, because, and again, a lot of, there's a couple of Aerosmith albums from that era where I think just because it's from the 70s and it's Aerosmith, because they were like one of the coolest bands around, you have to love it. But then when you kind of go deep into some of these albums, like for me, the first album, there's some stuff on there I don't really care for much at all.
Yeah.
But I still, Aerosmith, the first album is a top, 5 or 6, 7 album for me. I don't know.
Yeah. See, for me with that one, I'm even lower because it's not even a peaks and valleys album for me. It's all medium stuff and lower. There are no peaks for me on that first album.
There you go. Yeah, that's our, yeah, there you go. Nazareth, close enough for rock and roll.
Yeah.
So this was the first one that came to mind for me when we started talking about this, because I always rank this album in, Nazareth has a million albums, right? So it's hard not to put this one fairly high. I mean, there's obviously ones I like more, but it instantly came to mind because I'm like, all right, I absolutely love Telegram, which is a top shelf Nazareth song for me. It's a top 10 song. It's their big kind of epic. They never really did anything like this before. This multi-part thing, constantly changing throughout the whole song. It's heavy. It's kind of poppy. It's got a little bit of everything that was Nazareth. Love it, right? And almost can't wait for it to end. I want it to be longer. Then you got this little instrumental Vicky, right? Where out come the acoustic guitars, and I'm not a big fan of the Nazareth doing this like kind of acoustic blues type of thing. I don't know. I like the big brash heavy Nazareth. That's what I like. So whatever, but that's quick. That's, then you got Homesick again, kind of bluesy, kind of Southern rockish for a bunch of Scots, right? I mean, I'm not nuts about that kind of stuff. Vancouver Shakedown, I like that. That's pretty upbeat, kind of rocking, got some good Manny Charlton guitar playing, kind of dig that. Born Under the Wrong Sign, kind of this funky bluesy thing. I don't mind that too much. Loretta's pretty good. That's kind of rocking. Carry Out Feelings, good pop song. I just don't know if I love it as a Nazareth song. You know what I'm saying? Again, they've proven over the years that they're good at writing that kind of stuff. It's a well-written song. It's catchy. Not one of my favorites. Lift the Lid, not crazy about that. You're the Violin is amazing. And I think I like You're the Violin even more as the years have gone on. And that's got a good, heavy foreboding, like kind of doomy riff going on. Great Dan McCafferty vocal in that. In fact, I think Dan sounds tremendous on this album. But like we were talking about, half this album to me, pretty lackluster. But those couple songs that I like, I mean, really for me, if I walk away with Telegram, You're the Violin, and Vancouver Shakedown, I like those a lot. And that elevates this album, even though the rest of it, doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, Nazareth is just a total peaks and valleys band for me as well. I mean, I'd even feel more so that way about playing the game and expecting.
I almost picked that one too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so my next choice. So this is an interesting one. So Scorpions Taken by Force. Here's the thing with the Scorpions catalog in the 70s, to me, is the whole thing is peaks and valleys, and the peaks are my favorite Scorpion songs of all times, and the valleys are just non-existent in the Matthias Jabs era. I mean, I basically on Love Drive and certainly the most uniform album they ever made, Animal Magnetism, and then Blackout, the peaks and valleys start going a little more, and then things kind of go a little downhill. It gets a little pedestrian or whatever. But often this gets rated the greatest Scorpions album of all time, and I've been known to say that I think across time. But again, when I look at it, I love the modern era stuff on here, even though Ole Roth, I mean, the whole idea is it's supposed to be complicated and Hendrix-esque and krautrock and all that sort of thing. So this is the deeper, more complicated version of the band, right? But I still like the happiest, the cheeriest, heaviest, most modern things from the old version of the band. And on this record, that would be Steam Rock Fever and He's a Woman, She's a Man. But Sails of Charon, greatest Scorpion song of all time. So we're back at Aerosmith, 1977, Scorpions, 1977. Sales of Sharon, it's kind of, there's no argument. I mean, most people, most lists that you ever see will put Sales of Sharon way up there, right? But then after that, it just gets kind of like really kind of depressing and krautrocking. I mean, I've Got to Be Free is really kind of cool and slinky and weird, but it also has the textures of the old Scorpions, right? But The Ride of Your Time, I mean, there's interesting, cool things on here. We'll Burn the Sky, The Ride of Your Time are also cool, but they're kind of depressing. Your Light, Born to Touch Your Feelings, I don't even remember how they go, but basically super peaks and valleys here. So that's, I picked that because that's the way I feel about almost all of that stuff. Virgin Killer, love it to death, but peaks and valleys, In Trance even more. But then, like I say, Animal Magnetism is about as uniform, other than Lady Starlight. Everything on that album is arranged and sounds the same, and it's got the big chords, and they're all just great songs. That is as uniform as the band would ever get. But yeah, this one definitely feels that way to me.
Yeah, I would agree. For me, I think Virgin Killer and In Trance are way stronger top to bottom than that album. But like you mentioned, that album has 2 or 3 drop dead classics that, you know, any day I could be like, well, you know, Virgin Killer, I like more songs on it, but Sales of Sharon is on Taken by Force.
Yeah.
You know, the pendulum swings. It's a really interesting concept we're talking about here. And that's a fantastic choice. And yeah, a lot of those Scorpions albums in the 70s there are definitely peaks and valleys, but for me, I mean, that's the era I love the most out of the entire discography. All right, so my next one, Dio, Sacred Heart.
Okay, yeah.
So I think like over the years, my opinion has changed quite a bit on this album since the 80s. You know, back in the 80s, this was the original classic lineup. You have to love this stuff, right? Because it's Dio and Vivian and Vinny and, you know, the rest of Jimmy, and, you know, this is the lineup. This was the original band. Most people over the years, those first 3 albums, you can't touch them. I have found in, you know, the last 20 years or so that I don't really enjoy a lot of songs on this anymore, or maybe I just don't enjoy them like I used to. That could be it. I find that Hungry for Heaven and Rock and Roll Children, to me, is just kind of another way to recreate the Rainbow in the Dark magic, and they're fine, catchy songs. I don't really feel the need to listen to them much anymore. King of Rock and Roll, Sacred Heart, Another Lie, great 3 tracks to lead off the album. I could almost stop there.
Yeah.
I find the rest of it kind of pedestrian, kind of like we've heard this before, specifically Just Another Day, Shoot, got no use for that song. I listened to it earlier again. I was like, Like the Beat of a Heart's pretty good. That I kind of like. So here, right there, I've named all the songs. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. 5 of them I really like. The other 5 or the other 4, I could probably leave. And quite frankly, I think that I found over the years that I like the follow-up album even more than this one, which, you know, you're not supposed to say because this is the classic lineup and you can't touch any of this stuff. But yeah, I find that that the album starts off with a bang, kind of dips a little bit. Then you got those really commercial tunes, which of course the masses loved. And then it kind of dips again towards the end. So it's kind of going all over the place. I don't know. So for me, this album, I still rank it pretty high because you have to. But I don't feel the need to listen to much of this anymore. You know, the couple songs I really like a lot. The rest of it's kind of like, it's kind of pedestrian Dio for me.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've risen to a challenge that I haven't risen to on this. And in your picking, like that pick is an album where you're talking about songs you like and don't like a fair bit. But when I think of that album, I can't get past kind of the uniformity of everything being guitar, bass, and drums, and being essentially the same volume, but with slight stylistic differences. So when I thought of this concept, I went through a lot of band catalogs where I saw too much uniformity and I couldn't really go peaks and valleys on them, right? You know, and Dio was one. You think of AC/DC, Black Sabbath. I mean, and then there were bands like Black Sabbath where it's like major stylistic differences all over the place, but I love everything on it. So it's not peaks and valleys for me for that reason, right? Yeah. So Yeah, funny one. And that album, just in general, I can't get past the production or the album cover on it.
Oh, the production is awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to it about an hour ago again, and I'm like, yeah, man, this album sounds like
Yeah.
dog shit. Holy cow.
Weird, eh?
It's
Yeah.
not good. Yeah, the album cover is not great. But like I said, I like quite a bit, a couple tracks on it, 4 or 5 of them. The others, I'm like, oof.
Yeah.
It just, to me, it sounds like a band that's that's kind of like on the verge of there's some kind of split going to happen. Something's not well within the ranks there. And again, maybe they were under record label pressure to crank out more hits. Rainbow in the Dark was a big hit for them. Not really much of anything of that nature on The Last in Line. So here it's like, you know what, guys, we got to get back to doing what you did on the first album. And I don't know, some of it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And then
right.
was supposed to say it does, but
yeah. Very true. Very true. Okay, so my next choice, I'm going with Status Quo on the Level, or Status Quo. We'll get our English viewers telling us.
Yes, they have kind of bludgeoned me into submission.
Made their point. Yes, I don't think I can get around that. It's Status Quo for me forever. But anyways. Why I picked this one, this is almost an extreme example of this, because I don't feel this way about all their albums, but I feel somewhat this way about almost all their albums. But this one, what I love about this record and why it's always so high up my list, and again, that's kind of the theme here, where we forget that there's a lot of songs we don't like on it too much. I think Little Lady, Down Down, and their kind of version, cover, whatever you want to call it, of Bye Bye Johnny. Those 3 songs. So this is a record where every time I play On the Level, it's directly to those 3 songs and then out. Play them all the time, too much. I almost feel guilty playing them all the time, right? It's my little Status Quo trip where I've got these truncated versions of some of these Quo albums, and this is the most extreme example. Like Little Lady and Down Down, I swear, and to be honest, I mean, Quo does this in a few places, but those 2 songs, over and above anything ZZ Top or Foghat could do or whatever, in terms of making a powerful argument for heaviness and just rolling like a tank with traditional music based on boogie and the blues, and here it's definitely boogie, right? It's up tempo, but Little Lady and Down Down are just so ferociously heavy in that idiom that I just, every time I play them, I just crack a smile. Like it's just so funny how incredibly powerful they sound. And it has nothing to do with the production, because on this record, they're kind of going for that middle range production thing where it's a little bit all about the guitars. It's not particularly gorgeous sounding. It's not great bottom end or great high end or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's just such a great example of that, because literally my version of this record is 3 songs long, and I love the record to death. And when I play the other ones, it's like, that's pretty cool too, whatever. But I don't do it. It's just literally those 3 songs, and then it's on to my favorite songs off of Quo, or my favorite songs off of Hello or Pile Driver. But there you go, Status Quo on the Level.
You know what? My relationship with that band, and I have a whole bunch of their studio studio albums. Probably, I probably have a dozen of them. I know they've got like 40 or whatever it is. It's most of the early stuff I have. And I find that I have that opinion with almost all of them, which is why when I'm in the mood to listen to them, I go pull out the live album, because I like the live versions better, and all the songs I like are on that album.
Yeah.
Because I just find if I listen to more than like 1 or 2 Quo albums in a row, I've got to feel like I'm listening to the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And they're all good, but you know what? I'm not a huge boogie fan, to be frank. I do like it from time to time, and I do like them. Like I said, I've gone out and I've purchased a good chunk of the catalog. I find that I like the songs that I like from them, and they tend to be the more well-known tracks. And I like hearing them in that live, that live album is cranking. And that's when that's what I grab when I'm in the mood to listen to them. Because I find that I'll do the same thing you do, is I'll put on Pile Driver or that one or any of the other ones, and I'll be like, yeah, skip. Oh, I like that one. Skip. Yeah, I like that one. And I'm like, you know what? I'll pull out the double live album and just play the whole thing through and through because that's what I want to hear.
See, that's interesting. So, because I thought of a few, honorable mentions where it expanded to include the whole band. So there are Peaks and Valleys albums by bands we love, and then there are Peaks and Valleys bands. And Status Quo is a Peaks and Valleys band for you. And I thought of, I was going to pick a Pantera album, but then I thought, you know what? As much as I love Pantera to death, every single one of their albums is one of these where it's like skip, too hard on the ears, too loud, too screechy from Dime, too much screaming, too fast. Pantera does fast terribly. They do a lousy job at fast. But it's the same thing. To me, it's like I literally almost could pull out the greatest hits or the live, because I love we did a show on this before, right? Yeah. I love commercial Pantera. Give me the most accessible Pantera possible, and I'm a happy Pantera fan, right? So yeah, there are Peaks and Valleys band for me.
Yeah, that Pantera live album is one of the greatest hits album. Is one of the best greatest hits album you'll ever hear. I mean, every song is like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's I at one point in time, because I had like a couple of Pantera CDs at one point. They don't have a lot, but I didn't have the whole catalog. And at one point, like in the 90s or the early 2000s, whatever it was, they came out with that greatest hits collection, and it had some like, B-sides and live stuff and covers on it. And I was like, I'm just going to get that. And I remember like, wow, this is like the best greatest hits collection ever. And then of course I went and got the rest of the catalog, but I kept it. I kept that because sometimes you just want to hear those songs and they're all great and you don't have the kind of filler stuff in between. So I totally get that. All right. My next choice here is Trilogy by Yngwie Malmsteen. No Rising Force to be found anywhere on the cover of this at this point in time, right? So this is Yngwie's third album, and this is the one album at the time with Mark Bowles on vocals, and this follows up for me his best album ever, which is Marching Out, and I think Marching Out, start to finish, perfection. By far my favorite album by him. And then after this, Mark Bowles is gone. Joe Lynn Turner comes in for Odyssey, which I think is also one of his best albums ever and his second best with no weak tracks. This album, when this first came out, played this a ton, proclaimed, my love for Yngwie, was my favorite guitar player at the time. For those couple of years, he was the new exciting guy, doing something a little different than EVH and blah, 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 neoclassical shredding, all that kind of stuff. And I remember, you don't remember, I'll never forget, good catchy tune. I think that was the right type of song for him because it got him some airplay. They had the video on MTV. Liar's a pretty good song. Queen in Love. And then you've got Magic Mirror, Fire, Fury, Crying, Dark Ages. You got the cool Trilogy suite at the end. I'm finding like everything after Queen in Love for the next like 5 tracks all sound exactly the same. It's this kind of, somewhat speedy, it's somewhat mid-tempo, neoclassical gothic kind of like the fury. And it's just like, and Mark Bowles, who's a fine singer, maybe it's the material, sounds very one note throughout this entire album. And I'm like, I always ranked this fairly high, but I think always from the beginning, I'm always kind of half the album, I don't really care for much at all. It all sounds the same. It's just lacking in any kind of dynamics. The production of the album doesn't really help either, but I'll stand by it. The first 3 tracks, love, like the instrumental at the end. The rest of it, it's really not that good. And it reminds me, and it's so funny because it's almost like this album, he has replicated and duplicated so many times in the 90s and the 2000s. Like it's exactly the same. It's not bad. I still listen to him. I still listen to this. I still like it a lot. But I will admit right now that this album there's more valleys than peaks here, I think. This is like peak and then sinking into the valley right in the end. So that's my next choice.
Yeah, it's true. With Yngwie, it's almost like, your brain is going to like focus on some hooks where it connects with you on an emotional level, and whether it's a chorus or a verse, a vocal melody. It's usually that versus anything else. And those are the songs that cross into that definition of the word anthem for you, right? And those are the songs that stick with you.
Yeah, because I mean, back then, for a young kid, it's playing guitar. It was all about the guitar solos were always, you wait for the guitar solo in every Yngwie song. But the problem is, after a while, it becomes that there's nothing else to grab you but the guitar solo. So, Yngwie had to have those songs that had the hooks, and he always did on every album. There's at least a couple of them. But, here and a lot of the other later albums, there's no hooks. So it's just like, you have these really good singers, because he's worked with a million of them, who don't really have any melodies to work with. And you're just waiting for the guitar solo. And then after a while, after like 15 albums, even all the guitar solos tend to sound the same. They're amazing, right? But it's just like, you got to give me something else here. And that's why I feel this album is like, he gave us a couple of tracks that are, got those hooks. They have that, and they have the guitar solos and the cool keyboards and the great drumming and the riffs. And then the rest of it's just kind of like each song kind of sounds like the same thing. It's just like the formula doesn't change at all. And I love this guy to death, but that's been kind of his MO throughout his whole career. And it's like, he should have been a monster, guitar player as far as like mainstream acceptance and knowledge on, but because he's just kind of like settled into this thing he's been doing for 30 years, it's like he just hasn't been able to get out of it. And there's a select audience for it, but Joe Q public is not going to listen to Yngwie Malmsteen Rising Force, right? It's just going to have no interest in it.
It's funny, and he hates when you say that, and he'll argue with you about it, and he'll say, no, it's not the same, and blah, blah, blah. But over the years, I think he's subtly moved over to kind of a better sort of philosophical stance on this. Like the last time I interviewed him, I mean, it was a pretty good answer. He said, look, this is what I do. This is what comes out of me. This is what I'm put on earth here to do, this specific thing. He doesn't want to admit that it's a narrow specific thing, but he kind of understands that literally the reason Yngwie exists on this planet is to give us this very pinpointed type of art, and that's what comes out of me, and I can't control it, and I'm not going to force anything else. That's kind of his deal now, right?
I get it, and not to derail this conversation, I totally get that, and yeah, he seems like that kind of guy. But if he were to look back on his career and look at the albums that sold, that resonate with the audience, is the albums that did really well was where he worked with these good singers, allowed them to help him write these vocal melodies, right? And come up with these songs that stay with you, that are catchy. I mean, a lot of the albums where it's just him doing everything, especially over the last like 20, 30 years even, they're lacking that. It's like, you know what? I know he's got the ego, he wants to control everything, but man, just look at that album he did with Joel and Turner. I mean, there you had a songwriting partnership, and all those songs are so memorable. Yeah. Even Jess Scott Soto to an extent. He did a little bit too in the early 90s with, I'm forgetting his name, right? Goran Edmond. And I mean, there's been so many of them. And it's just like, I understand if he wants to kind of stay in this place that he's in. I get it. But God, give us some songs that have hooks in them, just a little bit. Yeah. It's just like this kind of gothic one note over and over and over again, song after song, album after album, just like gets tired after a while. It's like, I want to love the stuff he puts out. I do, because I'm a big fan, but I find it's just like, oh God, this album sounds like the last one, which sounds like the one before that. Anyway, we've derailed the conversation long enough.
Well, just one last point on that. I mean, I gather that's really why Graham Bonnet fell out of Alcatraz, because he was kind of horrified with the final results, how much Joe Stump is soloing all over that record. And I think he got way more soloing than he bargained for, or that he would have wanted in that band. So it's almost like it was a communication thing where they should have come up with an arrangement or an agreement. And I could, you envision, hey, what if Ronnie James Dio and Yngwie made an album together? You almost expect them to sit down and say, okay, these two songs aren't going to have any solos at all, Yngwie. And this one will have the 8-bar solo once. And it's almost like you want to put it on paper. And Yngwie, being a sensible enough guy, would probably agree to something like that with a big star. It's just an imagined fantasy idea, right? But I think that's really what happened with Alcatraz. There is way too much Joe Stump, Yngwie style soloing all over that record. It just becomes a little too relentless, even though I rate it as my favorite album of the year.
Oh, it's a really good one. Yeah,
I love it.
You have to wonder, Graham at this point in the game does not want to give up the spotlight to someone else.
Yeah, I mean it's spotlight, but it's also like, let's make some great art here, and great art means there shouldn't be this many solos on the thing. So whether the solos happened after Graham did his vocals or whatever, I think he was a little surprised and caught off guard by it. Maybe not, maybe he is eccentric and hard to deal with. I don't know, but I think he has a good artistic point that I don't believe in what Alcatraz is doing, because there's just way too much soloing on it, and I agree with him. I think there should be half as much in that band. So yeah. All right, my next choice. I'm gonna go with this one next because it kind of sticks with the theme a little more. My last one's a little more complicated, but except Russian Roulette. I've said this before, and I'm experiencing this now because I get in the car, I go out for a jog or whatever, and this happens to be on the one iPod Classic that I have charged that I'm using all the time right now. And this was their self-produced album, and it doesn't sound great. But the funny thing about this record is that Monster Man, Aiming High, and Man Enough to Cry are three songs that I would say would be in my top 7 accept songs of all time, 7 or 8. So again, it's a little bit like Status Quo in that when I play Russian Roulette, I play those, and I play this a lot. I play those 3 songs and that's it. I mean, so I don't technically play it a lot. I'm only playing my EP version of this, my extended single of Russian Roulette. And like, I'm playing the songs over and over again. I'm going, why am I playing this song over and over again? This is ridiculous how obsessed I am with those 3 songs on this record. And then I move on, but it happens. I think the other reason I love those songs so much is that there's a little slower, and there's a little more space to get through this kind of clunky, junky, distorted, self-produced sound that you get on this album. It's not a good sounding album. But yeah, most of the other songs I find a little subpar, and top to bottom, I love all of Breaker, Restless and Wild, and Metal Heart, and Balls to the Wall better. Those are all uniform to me. Yeah. Although Balls to the Wall is as uniform as you can get, as is Restless and Wild, and you start to get a little bit of the peaks and valleys in Metal Heart. Yep. But this, unfortunately, the valleys are pretty not that great because they don't do a good job of the self-production. But those 3 songs on this album are just like, they're guilty pleasures because I play them way more than I should. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, and then they're another perfect example. 3 songs make that album great for you, but the rest you never even listen to, right? Yeah. But it's still a really good album. Yeah. Just for those 3. And here's a perfect example of this. Crash and Burn, Pat Travers. Oh, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think I've even ranked this as my favorite or my number 2 Pat Travers studio album. Crazy enough. But when I was going through and looking for things that fit into this subject here, into this topic, I mean, this is a perfect choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's got Snortin' Whiskey. Great song, right? This is his biggest selling album, if I'm correct. Can't Be Right. Good Pat Travers band song, got all the twin guitars, good raunchy kind of whatever you call Pat Travers. I always have a hard time describing Pat's music. It's kind of bluesy, it's kind of funky, it's definitely hard rock, The song Crash and Burn is cool, even though it's kind of different. It's got that weird kind of like reggae thing going through with these keyboards. Not a guitar song, but it's catchy, it's got a good hook. Born Under a Bad Sign is a good remake of that classic blues tune, but as Martin has said many times, it's like I wish some of these bands would stop like going and remaking old blues songs, especially, I mean, Born on the Bad Side's been done a million times. It's really good though, they do it well. Then we've got Is This Love, another cover track, all right, so I've talked about that before. Yeah, they do it good, but do I want to hear them doing Bob Marley? No. The Big Event, okay. Love Will Make You Strong, Material Eyes. I find after I get past Snortin' Whiskey, it's kind of like your Russian Roulette. I listen to the first 3 songs. I don't really need the rest of the album. Yeah. But those first 3 tracks are so great that obviously people bought this. Obviously, I rank it very high. I still listen to this. I go pop it in, but man, after those first 3 or 4 songs, okay, time for the next one. I do the same thing when I listen to it on the iPod, right? It's just, I find this a really puzzling album, yet I rank it really high because, again, it's that band.
Yeah.
This is one of the best bands ever. Okay.
Yeah.
And this to me, as the, as the big album it was supposed, it was and is for this band, really should have been better. I think a couple more original tracks on here. I don't know. It's a really spotty album that I love and I rank high, but when I really look at it, it's not all that great, actually.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and it's the one where they kind of admit, boy, we were smoking a lot of pot, right? Crash and burn. I never really thought of it that way, but it's also much mellower and more laid back than the previous album. But that back cover just takes you back to the live shots on, Go For What You Know, right? I mean, yeah, it's just like they're world beaters. They're like superhero. It's a superhero band, right? Yeah. And Can't Be Right is way up my list of favorite Pat Travers songs, and Snortin' Whiskey is amazing. And the production is really good on that.
It is. It's a great sounding album. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, you want, what it is? It's like, they came out with that killer live album. And, really, when you think about it, this band, these 4 guys did not really play together all that long. So you're almost kind of, with the excellence of the live album, you were waiting for them to come out with the studio album that did just that. And this does it partly. And then before you know it, you blink and this lineup is no more again. So exactly. I think, to me, as great as some of the stuff is on here, this album is a massive disappointment of what could have been. Yeah. Right. I'm still going to rank it high, though.
Yes, and it's an album you're rooting for and championing and wishing it was better, right? You love the title, you love the album cover, you love the shots on the back cover, everything's there. You love this version of the band, and then they just like, oh, come on, 2 or 3 more songs like Snortin' Whiskey or whatever, right? So yeah.
Oh well.
All right. My next choice kind of feels a little bit along those lines, actually. So that's a good segue to this. I went with Led Zeppelin, In Through the Outdoor. Here's your paper bag of it, right?
And for the lunch bag.
Bottom, yeah. So this album is a funny one because I champion it and wish it was better, and really love the idea of a Led Zeppelin album in 1979. I love the production of it. It's a very weirdly produced album, but it's one of their more full-bodied produced albums. In fact, I think, it'd be my favorite Led Zeppelin production job. And I just love the textures and the mixes of the sounds. And I love what John Paul Jones does with, his pioneering use of keyboards and stuff. And again, Carousel Alhambra and Southbound Suarez are 2 of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. But where are our tracks on this? Are they anywhere? There they are. Hot Dog is on here. All My Love is just kind of like a rote ballad. I'm Gonna Crawl is like a slow blues, kind of depressing at the end. So all of a sudden you got half the album. In the Evening is not particularly quote unquote written. Fool in the Rain is pretty cool. But again, it just feels like a patchy album, even though I just love the idea of it, and just as a whole package, I like it a lot. And it just vaults up in my Zeppelin ranking. But I think of like a Led Zeppelin 4, and it's like I love every song on it. Everything's great on Led Zeppelin 4. Notwithstanding what I've said about Stairway to Heaven in the past, right? Given that whole thing, but still, obviously a really good song. But yeah, this is one where there are certain things that Zeppelin fans really hate on this album, and then because it's only got so few songs, all of a sudden you've got an album that you're really only liking sort of half of it. But yeah, it just feels one of those that you champion the totality of it, even though you almost like conveniently forget there's songs that you don't like on it.
Yeah, you got to give them credit for doing some different stuff on it for sure. Because it's probably the least Led Zeppelin-y sounding album. And you have to give John Paul Jones credit for really stepping in and picking up the mantle there, because Jimmy was, not in the best of shape during the recording of this album. but yeah, there's a couple tracks on there. Like, I remember when the album first came out and they released All My Love as a single. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Now I'm like, skip.
Yeah.
Hot Dog, skip. Carousel Alhambra is great. I still like In the Evening quite a bit. And I'm Gonna Crawl is a pretty good blues tune. But again, it's like we've heard those type of things from them before. Right.
And we're in a really sad place when In the Evening is the heaviest metal song on the album.
Well, hell yeah.
Because it is not heavy metal, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say when that album first came out, I kind of dug it, but I was deep down inside, I was pretty disappointed. I was like, man, this is pretty lightweight.
Oh yeah, they got a lot of abuse at the time. Zeppelin fans were shocked about the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But Carousel Alhambra just emerges slowly and quietly and politely as just this amazing Zeppelin epic, and the changes it goes throughout that long song. It's like way up my list of favorite Zeppelin songs.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah. All right, my final pick of the day. I almost put this one back and picked another one, but I the more I think about it, it totally makes sense here. Exodus, Fabulous Disaster.
Oh. Right.
So this is the second album with Zetro on vocals, and I rank this pretty high generally. I think when I did my Exodus album ranking, this was either it was in the top 5. I don't remember exactly where it wound up. And I always kind of look at the first 2 albums with him on vocals and kind of compare them. And I go back and remember like, where I was at the time with this band. Because I remember, Bonded by Blood, I liked a lot, but I was never into Paul Baloff's vocals. I mean, that album is a thrash classic. Songs are great, top to bottom. I never liked his vocals. I know I've been torched for saying that many times in the past, but I don't like him as a singer, right? And then Zetro comes in. He's got a totally different style, right? And I still feel he's the singer for this band. And, the first album I thought was really, really good. This came out, I was totally into it, saw them live on this tour, and a lot of these songs sound great on stage. But over the years, and re-listening to this album, like, all right, The Last Act of Defiance title track is, not title track, but that and the next song, Fabulous Disaster, both really good. Toxic Waltz, kind of dumb, but it's great live. Lowrider, no use for that. Again, with all these covers, right? Well, what's the deal? Cage in Hell is okay. Like Father, Like Son is okay. Corruption is pretty good. Verbal Razors, Open Season, and Overdose, just more of the same. It's almost like the entire second half of this album, all the songs just go one into the other to the other. They all sound the same, and there's no identity to them. The first 2 Exodus albums, all the songs had an identity, had a similar feel. Half of this album has that, but the rest of it's just kind of run-of-the-mill thrash. But I still really like this album a lot because the first half is so strong. So again, it's another one of those kind of, we did the song on the first half of the album, really good, and then it just kind of falls off a cliff. That's this album for me to a T. And it just, what works really works. I don't mind the production, right? It's big and ballsy sounding, but I don't know. Just, I rank it high because I have to, because it's the first 2 albums with Zetro, and this is classic period Exodus. But the more I think about it, the more this is a big peaks and valleys album.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've just been listening to that album because we're about to do the results show. We did the call for votes for Overkill Rewind. We're doing the top 5 heavy metal albums of 1989, and that got a lot of votes. It's not going to end up in the top 5. It's going to be an honorable mention. But I was just listening to that again. But it's cool seeing you pick something of a uniform sound again, like the Dio. And I couldn't rise to the challenge of being able to do that. And I thought the other place I couldn't do that is with prog. I couldn't find any prog ones because prog guys tend to make long songs with a lot of parts in them. So it doesn't really have that peaks and valleys thing unless it's Steve Howe doing a little, acoustic thing or something, right? It just didn't feel like I could find those things because with prog, I find those moments that connect with you are like 10 times the song. So it just didn't feel like it was, great song, lousy song, great song, lousy song kind of thing throughout. So
it's funny that you mentioned prog, because I think if I were to pick a prog album, now that I'm just thinking about it right now, not like I considered this, I could have easily picked Yes, Fragile, or as the Brits say, Fragile. That sounds better, Fragile, because that album is filled with all, you have the main songs and all the
Yes.
little kind of solo interludes in the middle.
Yeah.
I could care less about most of those little solo interlude things.
Yeah.
For me, the strength of that album is on the regular song. So that album is a perfect example of peaks
Yeah.
and valleys, because for me, yeah, the solo things are cool to hear a couple times, but when I listen to Fragile, I skip them. Because I want to hear South Side of the Sky and all the other great tracks that are on there, right? It's just like,
yeah, cool. I wanted to mention a couple honorable mentions, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Go fast through this. Budgie In for the Kill. UFO Phenomenon is a funny one because of Doctor and Rock Bottom, and then the rest of it, who knows what's on it, right? Kind of thing, right?
Queen of the Deep, Martin. Queen of the Deep.
Yeah, right. Oh My and all that. Yeah. Metal Church, The Dark, and Blessing in Disguise are kind of like that. I even went through The Dark again this morning, and it's like, part of this process or concept is the idea of the only songs off an album that you could sing in your head, and they're constantly going through your head all the time. And there's 2 or 3 from The Dark that are like that, and I don't know anything about the rest of it unless I go play it again, right?
Even though you've heard it a million times, right?
Exactly, yeah. Angel on Earth, As It Is in Heaven, again, just love the heavy ones more or less, not so much the other ones. Faith No More album of the year. When you get into those difficult Faith No More albums, certain things just connect like crazy. You want to love the whole album. You love the concept, and you love that they're doing something kind of like anti-commercial or whatever. So you're like, I got to push this up the list because, it's what a proper musicologist would think about this record. But then when you play it, it's only 2 or 3 that are really connecting with you, kind of thing. So those ones, and one I actually had a prop for. Well, actually, here's another band I had props out for. Tragically Hip feels like that for me, the big Canadian band. I love certain songs, but I just wish I liked more of them. And then, something I was going to pick for homework one day, but I'm thinking I might not assign this for homework because I don't even know if you can buy these because they're not on Spotify. The Hounds with Unleashed. Look at that album cover. It's not a punk album at all. It's a good hard rock album. But then the second one, this really was almost the first thing that came to mind because I love Working on My Cool and Who'll Be the Next in Line, and Angel of Fire. Who'll Be the Next in Line is a cover. Angel of Fire is crushingly heavy, and Working on My Cool just sounds like the greatest Boston hit song of all time. This whole album feels that way, but so much of the rest of it I'm just not happy with, like Under My Thumb getting a Stones cover again. We've talked about that. But yeah, it's you want to love it more. But yeah, these are ones, like I say, I don't think I would ever assign because I'm not even sure you can buy them. They were both on CBS Columbia too.
Oh wow, okay.
But just show you this quickly. So basically, this is what the Hounds look like. They're from Chicago, right? I mean, they're just like a rockin' band, right? Cool looking rockin' band. So don't let that album cover fool you. If you ever get a chance to hear this album, it's like a Ram Jam Derringer Aerosmith type album. Maybe a little lighter, maybe a little Dictators to it, and then big changes for this one. But this really is a peaks and valleys in a big way. The second one and the first one, no, it's more uniform. So there you go.
Yeah, the 2 of the ones that I was considering, Queen's The Game is one of them.
Yeah.
To me, always, I think from the beginning, a lot of peaks and valleys there. And One of These Nights by the Eagles, which, I always rank pretty high, but man, I love the title track. I like maybe 2 or 3 other songs. The rest of it, don't really care for it. But, great album cover, great title track. Yeah, I rank it pretty high. So I'm sure there are many others, but I think we came up with some good ones for this. So, So thanks for watching, everybody. So in the comments below, if you've got any peaks and valleys albums that basically, follow the guidelines we just laid out for you here, put them in the comments below. It'll be interesting to see what people come up with, and if there will be any yes moments from us as we read them, like how can we forget that one, right? But so stay tuned for another episode next week here with Martin and myself. Coming up also this weekend, we've got the next installment of album Homework Assignment with George LeMay and Rand Cali. So stay tuned for that. That'll be lots of fun. Martin, what's going on your end? Your neck of the woods?
Well, I don't know, just martinpopoff.com for the books. I did just do a Contrarians on Foghat, picked my favorite Foghat album, which was Night Shift. What did I do for History in 5 Songs, my podcast? I did the last great new wave of British heavy metal albums. So it's kind of looked at the end of the thing, and where do you define the end of the new wave of British heavy metal? Is it 83? Is it 84, 85? Some people say 81, 82. So that was kind of cool. And I might get another new Wabba one out of the next episode, which I got to do on the weekend. So there you go.
Cool. Sounds good. Lots of fun stuff. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned for Forgotten Favorites each and every day throughout the end of the month before we move into our favorite live albums by year, starting September 1st, each and every day throughout the month of September. So thanks for watching. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. See you all later on. Take care.